Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 131 based on novel. So let's start. Buddha anger. Reincarnation. When the words full of indifference in Xiao Yan's mouth slowly spit out, the flame wheel in his palm also blooms a dazzling light in the next moment. The brilliant fire rose into the sky and filled the world with the momentum of burning the sky. At this moment, when looking at Xiao Yang, all the people in Hanshi City couldn't help showing a deep color of fear. Even if they were stronger than those who fought against the emperor, at this moment, their faces also looked extremely shocked. Different from before, at this moment, the fighting skills condensed in Xiao Yang's hands made them feel shocked and shocked. They can clearly feel that the fire wheel is full of extremely hegemonic power. The destructiveness contained in that power is enough to make them fear. Who the hell is this boy? How can he have such terrible fighting skills? At present, his strength is only half emperor level. If you and I were treated by strong people of the same level, I'm afraid this level of fighting skills would be enough to kill you and me. His identity is definitely not simple. He can have such excellent cultivation talent and such terrible fighting skills. This guy is definitely not an ordinary person. There must be a bigger backstage behind him. Fortunately, we didn't do it, otherwise. Thinking about the result that seemed a little scary, several strong fighters in the distance couldn't help looking at each other, and the look in their eyes also seemed a little afraid. If Xiao Yang is really an unusual person in front of them at the moment, they really can't afford it. After all, even if they are strong against the emperor, they can't protect themselves on this continent. The Yuanwu continent is very big. Fighting the emperor doesn't represent anything. In the face of some really powerful families or forces, even if they are as strong as fighting the emperor, they are still like mole ants in front of those forces. Yuanwu continent is very big. There are not a few people who are stronger than those who fight the emperor. Excessive madness will only accelerate their destruction. Perhaps the struggle between the Sunbai family in front of them is the beginning of their destruction. Thinking of this, the strong fighters in the distance couldn't help retreating and looked at each other. They all quietly took back their breath, and even someone turned around and left here quietly. A strange enemy is the most dangerous. Although the name of Xiao Yang has spread all over the western regions, everyone doesn't know the identity behind him and its origin. Although the bounty given by the 4 major gates is very moving, not everyone will be so crazy. Many people lick blood at the edge of the knife, but there are not no people who are really practicing. A moment of greed can destroy all of you, including your relatives, in an instant, but a stable state of mind can make you sail far and avoid capsizing in the gutter. Bang bang bang. Then the next moment, when the reincarnation of Buddha's anger in Xiao Yang's hand completely broke out, the black light column and the power of breaking the sky destroyed those fighting chi that shot at him in an instant. Immediately after that, the indifferent dark light column had been swept from them without waiting for the semi-emperor strong to return to their senses. But for those who were swept by the black light, the breath of terror and destruction immediately penetrated their bodies. They can only feel a breath of death approaching their souls. At the same time, they can clearly see that the body part swept by the black light column is a strange decomposition. Yes, under the black light, everyone's skin gradually began to crack, just like the dried bark, which quickly fell off from them at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then the blood and flesh under them, to the dense white bones, and even part of the bones, also turned into a piece of powder under the black light. Under the black beam of light, everything will fall apart. In the twinkling of an eye, above this void, there is an endless roar of pain. The body decomposed by the black light has no pain, and can only feel a general void without anything. However, it is for this reason that the disappearance of no feeling makes these people's hearts more frightened. Invisibly, it seems that they have fallen into the abyss of death. Unconscious death is the most frightening thing. After all, death may not be terrible, but the process is terrible to the extreme. In just a few breaths, between heaven and earth, those who were hit by the reincarnation of Buddha's anger fell from the void with weak breath, and then hit the city below. Although the destructive power of Buddha's anger reincarnation is silent, it is still terrible. This strange silence makes all people who come into contact with it tremble. At this moment, even with the hearts of Sun Shuo and Bai Ying, the look on their faces could not help a change. After noticing the strangeness of the black light, they couldn't help looking at each other secretly. Even they couldn't imagine that Xiao Yang in front of them would control such a terrible power. Even with their experience, they didn't know the strangeness of the power. What on earth is this boy's fighting skill? How can it be so strange? No matter today, even if you fight with this guy, you must keep Xiao Yang here. If you have this fighting skill, let alone the first of the 4 families, I'm afraid that even the elder seat of Tianjianmen will have a place for my Sun family in the future. Although he was surprised at Xiao Yang's fighting skills, Sun Shuo was more greedy at the moment. After all, if she can cultivate such a strange fighting skill to great success, once she displays it, won't all the strong fighting emperors who fight with him be broken down to death by this fighting skill? At that time, let alone fighting emperors, I'm afraid she is the strong one in the source environment, and his son Shuo can also fight. With this in mind, Sun Shuo's greedy heart was even worse. He roared in his heart, and the fighting spirit in his body was raised in an instant. He ignored Bai Ying's instant change of face. His strong body moved suddenly, and approached Xiao Yang at a lightning speed. At the same time, Xiao Yang at the moment also quickly found Sun Shuo's action. Seeing this, Xiao Yang felt very dignified in his heart. At the same time, he couldn't care so much. The Buddha's anger reincarnation in his hand instantly pointed to Sun Shuo. At the same time, a few fighting spirits in his body poured out at this moment and poured into the flame wheel in his hand. Buddha anger reincarnation. Block it for me. Xiao Yang's face became extremely dignified. At the same time, his whole body strength was poured into the Buddha anger reincarnation. At this moment, Xiao Yang could only expect the Buddha anger reincarnation in his hand. Bang! With the pouring of fighting spirit, the black light column, which was only 10 feet thick, turned into a nearly 100 feet thick light column in the twinkling of an eye. At the same time, its power also became more terrible. In the twinkling of an eye, it had been severely bombarded on Sun Shuo. When the black light spot touched Sun Shuo's body, it immediately poured into his body. In front of the black light spot, even if Sun Shuo had fighting spirit to protect his body, he could not resist it completely. But in a flash, Sun Shuo was shocked to find that the robe on his chest had turned into nothingness under the black light. At the same time, the skin on his chest had festered about the size of the palm of his hand. How is this possible? This scene directly shocked Sun Shuo. It's hard to imagine that under the black light, his body will inevitably be broken down and dissipated. So strange fighting skills. Even the fighting spirit of the Emperor can be broken down. Aware that the gas mask protecting his body is dissipating at an extremely slow speed, Sun Shuo's pupil suddenly shrinks in his sharp eyes, and the horror in his heart is even more indescribable. In front of this strange fighting skill, it can really be called the only one in Sun Shuo's life. It can forcibly decompose the opponent's fighting spirit. If you want to do this, under normal circumstances, unless your own strength is far better than the other party, it is impossible to decompose the refined fighting spirit of others. However, at the moment, this absolutely impossible scene actually appeared in front of Sun Shuo, which could not help but shock his heart. At the same time, Bai Ying on the other side also found something wrong here. With a light frown, he was not in a hurry to make a move, but his mind moved and his soul power spread out. He carefully explored around the black light column bombarding Sun Shuo. But then, when Bai Ying's soul power just approached the black light column, Bai Ying clearly felt that there was an extremely strange suction in the black light column. Before that suction, Bai Ying's soul power immediately seemed to be pulled. Although Bai Ying recovered in time, there were still a few strands of soul power swallowed up by the black light column. The soul power was swallowed, and Bai Ying, as the master, was immediately involved. A stabbing pain came from the depths of his soul, which immediately distorted the expression on Bai Ying's face. What? He couldn't help but scream. Bai Ying's body standing in the void also couldn't help quitting half a step back and staring at Xiao Yang. To be exact, it's the fighting skill displayed by him at the moment, the reincarnation of Buddha's anger. This ghost fighting skill, how can it be so strange that it can devour my soul power? Staring at the black light column with lingering fear on his face, Bai Ying couldn't help feeling extremely surprised. At the same time, he was also colorful in his eyes to Xiao Yang. A mere half-emperor already has the power to shock the strong fighting emperor. It's hard to imagine how strong it will be if he steps on the strong fighting emperor in the future. This time, I'm afraid the 4 doors kicked the iron plate. With a secret voice in his heart, Bai Ying felt an unprecedented solemnity in his heart. However, he turned into a faint light in the depths of his eyes, and disappeared in a flash. Although the 4 big doors have been kicked to the iron plate, if his Bai family can be careful, the last person who laughs will be his Bai family. The rise of small roles may also rely on the demise of these big roles. In the western regions, which has remained unchanged for hundreds of years, it's time to reshuffle. Back to his mind, Bai Ying's eyes slowly narrowed into a thin line. Mu Lu solemnly stared at Xiao Yang until after the good film was carved, he looked at Sun Shuo again. His eyes flickered slightly, and the fighting spirit in his body ran quietly. At the same time, Sun Shuo, who is trying his best to resist the black light column in front of him, also looks more and more gloomy on his face. In the face of this strange fighting skill, even if he was a strong fighter, he was also frightened. However, he had never heard that such strange fighting skills still existed in Yuanwu mainland. Xiao Yang, what's your fighting skill? Sun Shuo stared at Xiao Yang with a ferocious face and said in a very low voice. Buddha anger. Reincarnation. In this regard, Xiao Yang only replied in a very indifferent tone. At the moment when the voice of the words fell in his mouth, the huge dark light column in his hand also trembled suddenly at this moment. Immediately, a stronger breath came out from it, and the divine color on Sun Shuo's face could not help changing again. Under the black light column, even he felt a resistance at the moment. While his face changed slightly, a surge of anger also quickly rushed into Sun Shuo's heart. As a strong man fighting the emperor, he was stopped by a boy at the level of half-emperor today. If this kind of thing was spread, wouldn't he Sun Shuo want to become a laughingstock of others, which makes his Sun family stand among the 4 families in the future? Roar. With this in mind, Sun Shuo's anger in his chest was immediately uncontrollable. He couldn't bear to utter an earth-shaking roar. As soon as the tiger's body shook, the surging fighting spirit poured out from Sun Shuo's whole body. The mighty power called the world out of his mind. Drink. The sleeve robe waved suddenly, and the surging fighting spirit immediately turned into a terror connecting heaven and earth. With a fierce domineering momentum, it bombarded the lacquer black light column in front of it. Bang! The violent roar shook heaven and earth. In front of the strong fighting spirit of the strong fighting emperor, Rao was reincarnated with Xiao Yang's Buddha anger, but it was also difficult to support it. With just one blow, Xiao Yang's Buddha anger reincarnation was forcibly smashed for nearly 100 feet. Together with Xiao Yang at the moment, his face turned white at the moment. There was a dull hum in his throat, and a touch of blood slowly flowed down from the corners of his mouth. As for more, it was forcibly swallowed by him. Xiao Yang understands that the more this time comes, the more he can't show weakness. Otherwise, I'm afraid he really can't leave here today. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang couldn't help glancing at Bai Ying standing in the distance. Somehow, he placed his hope on this guy. Although the latter is also one of the 4 families, Xiao Yang can vaguely feel that Bai Ying seems to have no intention of harming him. On the contrary, he helped him stop Sun Shuo, who had wanted to fight him for a long time. Even though we still don't know what the purpose of the latter is, for now, Bai Ying is the only person who can help him except Guyo. Of course, this premise is that he is really willing to help himself. Otherwise, even if Xiao Yang can leave Hanshi City at that time, I'm afraid he has just left the tiger's den and entered the wolf's nest again. Bang bang. Several roars sounded one after another, and Xiao Yang quickly regained his mind. However, in the twinkling of an eye, Sun Shuo had appeared in front of him. His face was fierce, and the fierce light suddenly appeared in a pair of fierce eyes. The cold killing intention stabbed people's skin like essence. As soon as his palm was raised, Sun Shuo slapped down on Xiao Yang's forehead. Even if your fighting spirit is weird, it's just a trick in front of the absolute strength of the emperor. Now, you're damn it. Die. The earth-shaking roar echoed between heaven and earth like thunder. At this moment, everyone's face was in capital letters of horror. The strong man fighting the emperor is really so strong. Looking back, Xiao Yang's fighting skills were extremely strange. Everyone who came into contact with him was frightened. Even if he was as strong as the 9-star and half-emperor, he was also shocked physically and mentally before the strange fighting skills. If there were no strong means to protect his life, even the 9-star and half-emperor had no choice but to die in the face of those black strange light pillars. However, at the moment, in front of the real emperor fighting strong man, even though Xiao Yang has tried his best, he still can't resist the random bombardment of the latter. However, in the twinkling of an eye, the strange lacquer black light column that was still showing its power the moment before has completely collapsed at this moment, turned into a light spot all over the sky, and gradually dissipated. At the same time, Sun Shuo, who stands in front of Xiao Yang at the moment, has a strong fighting spirit in his hands. At the moment, it also condenses rapidly. In a twinkling of an eye, it condenses into essence, just like a layer of orange crystal stone on Sun Shuo's palm. His big hands are raised, the green tendons on his arms are exposed, and his face is ferociously patted at Xiao Yang. If this palm falls, I'm afraid it is with Xiao Yang's strength, and there is no possibility of survival. In his heart, Xiao Yang's face suddenly turned white, and he couldn't care so much anymore. His mind flew around rapidly, frantically squeezed the remaining fighting spirit in all parts of his body, gathered it quickly, and then hurriedly gathered in the palm of his hand to make the last fight. At the same time, Xiao Yang hurriedly shouted Jiuyu in his heart. Of course, it is impossible to survive in front of Sun Shao by his own strength. If he wants to leave here, he may have to rely on the Jiuyu in his body. Alas! You are indeed reckless this time. The previous battle has consumed too much fighting spirit. Now this guy has shot at you. You don't even have the possibility to hide. Leave the rest too. However, immediately after that, before the words in Jiuyuku fell, a white light flashed in the space in front of Xiao Yang, and then the earth-shaking bang echoed again between heaven and earth. Boom! Tens of feet high waves of fighting spirit swept in all directions. However, those who were affected all vomited blood and regressed, and even some weak people were seriously injured under the residual threat. When the world was white, everyone couldn't help narrowing their eyes. Until the good film was engraved, the white light gradually dimmed and the sun's brilliance fell on the earth again. The people between heaven and earth gradually saw it. At this moment, above the sky and in the people's sight, the three human shadows were standing in the void. Among the three figures, two people were touching each other, while the other one was blocked behind by a middle-aged man in white robe. He also blocked the terrible fighting wave on Sunday. After seeing these three figures, the expressions on all faces in heaven and earth were frozen in an instant. No one thought that he would shoot again. This guy, it's hard not to get Xiao Yang. Is he really going to oppose the Sun family? Tut tut, it seems that the attraction of Xiao Yang to his white family is far more than the deterrence of the Sun family. Hey, if two tigers fight, one will be hurt. I'm afraid I'll know what happened today soon after the news of those two families. At that time, there will be a good play between the four families. Yes, the Zhou family and the Hua family are superior in strength. The Zhou family has coveted the other three for not a year or two, but the four families have been in a balance, so the Zhou family has not started yet. Now, once the Bai family and the Sun family fight, I'm afraid. In the distance, several strong fighters whispered to each other. They also had their own views on the four families. However, it seems that the ultimate beneficiaries of the struggle between Sun Bai and Bai will become the other two. Bai Ying, do you really think I dare not fight you here? I never thought that with your mind. I was not surprised at this point. What can you give up for the sake of interests? Bai Ying smiled coldly at Sun Shao's almost roaring words, which was full of disdain. While talking, Yu Guang from the corner of Bai Ying's eye glanced at Xiao Yang with a smile in his eyes. The time has come. I think it's time for Xiao Yang to leave. Noticing Bai Ying's gaze, Xiao Yang frowned and guessed in his heart what Bai Ying's purpose was. Listen to me. Now Xiao Yang is at the end of a powerful crossbow. As long as you catch Xiao Yang for me, I promise, he will not only give him 2 third-order pills, but also become an elder of my Sun family. In the future, he can take the cultivation resources of my Sun family. Sun Shao's eyes swept over the semi-imperial strongmen below. The words spit out in his mouth made the people below more excited. In his bleak eyes, scarlet light burst out again at the moment. The increase in the price of chips immediately made the hearts of these semi-imperialist strongmen who had been seriously injured crazy. They all endured the injuries in their bodies, and began to run the little fighting spirit left in the cyclone in their bodies. Their hearts moved, and the fighting spirit poured out of their bodies. The light fighting spirit was like a layer of gauze over the body surface of the semi-imperialist strongmen, like a layer of gauze. Dozens of semi-emperor strongmen slowly rose to the void and stared at Xiao Yang. Although they were seriously injured, Xiao Yang was weaker than them. Now, it is the best time to seize him. Rush. He is at the end of a powerful crossbow now. As long as we catch him, we will be the elders of the Sun family in the future. A low roar with a little excitement sounded in the sky. Once this word came out, the look in the eyes of everyone was even slightly radiant. Compared with the third-order pill, as long as you become an elder of the Sun family, you will have countless cultivation resources in the future. How can you be worse? Suddenly, dozens of Taoist shadows tried their best to urge the fighting spirit in the body, quickly swept away, and rushed to Xiao Yang who was standing behind Bai Ying at the moment. However, compared with the usual, at the moment, their speed seems too slow, and this still surprises the people at the moment. Seeing this, Bai Ying frowned secretly in his heart. If something happened to Xiao Yang, it wouldn't be as good as he wanted. You dare to move the people the head of the clan wants. With a cold hum, Bai Ying waved his big hand. Suddenly, the terrible water-blue fighting spirit rushed out, turned into a huge fighting wave, crossed Xiao Yang, and swept away at the dozens of semi-imperialist strong men. The half-emperor strong men who came to Xiao Yang quickly were blown down into the void. Bai Ying looked indifferent and slowly moved down. The cold and indifferent sight swept slowly from the half-emperor strongmen below. Anyone swept by this sight felt a cold and a deep chill in his body, and immediately arose from the depths of his heart. Those who dare to move me in front of the emperor are too brave. There is no emotion in the indifferent tone. The invisible pressure released is like a dense thunder cloud suspended above people's head, which will suffer its terror all the time. Bai Ying, Xiao Yang belongs to my Sun family. His life and death are naturally determined by my Sun family. If you want to intervene, let's see if you have that ability. One side, Sun Shuro's tone was very cold and angrily scolded. With a wave of his big hand, the orange and viscous fighting spirit condensed rapidly in his hands and turned into a broad and strong giant sword in a twinkling of an eye. Under the control of Sun Shuro's mind, the giant sword waved and cut in the air, and its fighting spirit was covered out of thin air. The sharp giant sword blasted at Bai Ying with a bamboo-breaking momentum. At the same time, Sun Shuro's extremely cold voice came out again. The people of the Sun family listen to our clan leader. No matter what happens today, we must keep Xiao Yang for our clan leader. As long as any of you can catch him, you will be listed as an elder in the future. Otherwise, if Xiao Yang runs away, our clan leader will let you move your head today. Suddenly, the faces of the Sun family in the lower city changed one after another. No one thought that in order to catch a Xiao Yang, Sun Shuro would force his people again and again, and even threaten them with sex and life. However, it can be seen that no one in the whole family dares to listen to Sun Shuro's words and fight Xiao Yang. How can he not be angry? At least he is the head of a noble family. His words have made these people unmoved. It must be that even for others, he will never feel good. Sure enough, hearing Sun Shuro's words, the faces of the Sun family in the city below suddenly turned pale. Even the old faces of the Sun family elders also didn't look very good. They all knew the temperament of their patriarch. Once he became more serious and did something, even they can't stop it. Ignoring the words in Sun Shuro's mouth, Bai Ying gave a sneer with sarcasm, waved his big hand, started with the long gun, and cheered. The strong wind of hiss immediately roared in his ears. The gun tip was sharp and easily tore through the void. The purple fighting spirit lightning surrounded the gun tip, and immediately collided with the oncoming giant sword. Ding! With a crisp sound, Sun Shuro and Bai Ying retreated a few steps each, while Xiao Yang took oral pills. His body sat on the void, his eyes closed slightly, and he refined rapidly in his body. At the same time, the soul power diffused and shrouded around Xiao Yang, just in case. Ding ding! On the other hand, the battle between Bai Ying and Sun Shuro also officially began. They did not use their real strength, but competed with the purest force. I believe that if it is not a last resort, even Sun Shuro will not really want to meet with their real strength. After all, if it is true, as Bai Ying said earlier, their family, I'm afraid it's going to be destroyed. The two figures collided crazily in the sky and flashed rapidly, leaving countless residual shadows on the void. As seen by the people below, they couldn't help showing a look of horror in their eyes. The solidity of the residual shadows made it difficult for them to distinguish the true from the false. So far, they couldn't recognize where Sun Shuro and Bai Ying were. It has to be said that fighting the Emperor's strong man is really so terrible. When he starts, he can't even see his figure. It's hard to imagine what a shocking scene it would be if a higher-level strong man starts. And unknowingly, on the horizon, several figures were frightened and surrounded Xiao Yang quietly. Compared with before, Xiao Yang is not guarded at the moment, and he is really at the end of his tether, so it is undoubtedly the best time to start now. Seeing this scene, Bai Ying, who is fighting with Sun Shuro at the moment, can't help but change her face slightly. Education frees up her hand to help Xiao Yang, but Sun Shuro in front of him suddenly rises in momentum and blocks Bai Ying's figure who wants to leave. Ha, you'd better take care of yourself rather than others. In the past, you and I were known for being fierce, and I owe you 3 points. Why are you timid today? Please don't see that you can suppress me at all. Why, have you grown this strength after so many years of cultivation? Sun Shuro was overjoyed when he finally saw the strong ones in his family. At the same time, the fighting spirit in his body was more turbulent, and he stopped Bai Ying in front of him, so that he couldn't spare his hand to help Xiao Yang solve the problem. On the void in the distance, those strong fighting emperors frowned one after another and looked at the scene in front of them. Unexpectedly, the master of the Sun family did things so ruthlessly, but such means are shameful. After all, Sun Shuro is also a strong fighting emperor. In order to catch a 6-star-and-a-half emperor, he would do such things to win more over less. It's a bit embarrassing anyway. Of course, Sun Shuro at this moment has no time to pay attention to these. He has lost enough face today. As long as he can catch Xiao Yang, it's not bad. When Bai Ying was a little anxious, the 10 strong men of the Sun family gathered around Xiao Yang. 2 of them were strong men with 9-stars-and-a-half emperors, while the others were strong men with more than 5-stars-and-a-half emperors. One of the weakest was also with the cultivation of 6-stars-and-a-half emperors in the later period. Such behavior is stronger than Xiao Yang today. Of course, it's just the superficial strength of the people. In fact, although there are more than a dozen people around Xiao Yang at the moment, they are also very nervous in their hearts. In the face of this unknown young man in black robes, they will always feel uneasy. Even if they see that he has become the end of a powerful crossbow, who knows, is such a body, will it have enough power to destroy them? Buzzing, buzzing. In the cyclone, when the last pill was completely refined by Xiao Yang closed his eyes for a moment. At this moment, he suddenly opened his eyes, and his fierce eyes immediately swept around him. Among the semi-imperialist strong men who were only 10 feet away from him, the cold light suddenly appeared in Xiao Yang's eyes. Together, or one by one. The slightest mood fluctuation could not be heard in the indifferent words, and the contempt made the hearts of these semi-imperial strong men around me feel humiliated. Until after the good film, more than 10 people looked at each other. They looked at Xiao Yang with a fierce look on their faces, and looked at Xiao Yang with one eye. Xiao Yang, we know you are powerful, but after so many wars, you have become the end of a powerful crossbow. As long as we go together, you will never survive. Among the more than 10 people, an old man in a brocade robe shook his weapon and said hoarsely, "Oh, in that case, why do you hesitate? Come together and clean up you. It's time for me to leave." Glancing at the old man in front of him, he was one of the 2 9-star-and-a-half emperor strong men in the field at the moment, but even so, the look on Xiao Yang's face was also unmoved. Compared with the ordinary indifferent words just now, the more than 10 people around them suddenly tightened up, and the breath at the tip of their nose couldn't help becoming a little hasty. When they saw Xiao Yang's confident appearance, they were shocked. Let's go together. Didn't you see just now that he is trying to recover his internal injury? Now he has not healed, so he can spare his hand to deal with us. He must not last long. As long as we go together, he will be defeated. The old man in the brocade robe spoke again, and the bright weapons in his hands made a clang sound during the violent shaking, while the corners of Xiao Yang's mouth slowly aroused a sneer. Come on. In the old man's heart, he took the lead to rush over to Xiao Yang. After that, the other 10 people waved their weapons and stepped on the void fiercely. Their bodies turned into meteors and lightning and shot at Xiao Yang. In this regard, Xiao Yang sneered in his heart, and his body sitting in the void did not move. It seemed that he was waiting for the arrival of the moment of death. This also made more than a dozen people who were rushing in at the moment happy, and their mouths gave a violent drink, and the fighting spirit in his body poured out more violently at the moment. In a twinkling of an eye, the old man in the brocade robe, who was a strong 9-star-and-a-half emperor, had appeared in front of Xiao Yang. At the moment, the 2 people were less than 1 meter apart. The old man's face was ferocious, with a cruel sneer on his face. A big knife in his hand was held high above the top, and his fighting spirit was condensed. Then he cut off Xiao Yang's head. Looking at this posture, it seemed that he wanted to kill people. Xiao Yang was unmoved. He raised his eyes slightly, glanced at the old man in front of his eyes, and then opened his mouth. The earth-shaking roar came out of his mouth and shook the world. Huang Quan Tianyu. Moo. 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 3 times in a row, under such a close distance, the old man immediately lost his mind, and then, with a fierce wave of Xiao Yang's big sleeve, the invisible soul force immediately bombarded the old man's chest, and with just one blow, he blew it away. At this time, behind Xiao Yang, another 9-star-and-a-half emperor-level old man appeared like a ghost. He waved his long sword and took Xiao Yang's head. In the twinkling of an eye, the long sword blade was only less than an inch away from Xiao Yang's neck. Even Xiao Yang had no chance to dodge at such a short distance. Ha ha. Xiao Yang, go to hell. Blame yourself if you want to blame yourself. It's such a time. You dare to trust big. It's really beyond your strength. The old man sneered, and then he turned his back to Xiao Yang, and a sneer came out of his mouth. With a flick of his fingers, a black light suddenly flashed out behind Xiao Yan. He held his long sword tightly in the palm of his hand, and immediately shook it with a sudden force. The long sword broke, and the other palm of the shadow also shook into a fist, and then the next moment, then he bombarded the old man's head in front of him. Bang! The violent sound clearly spread in everyone's ears in the world. At this moment, everyone was stunned. Everyone stared at Xiao Yan in the field. To be exact, it was the figure behind him. The blood lash was sprayed on the black figure, and then immediately absorbed by some force. The essence of the blood was also absorbed by the black figure. And then look at the old man who was standing in front of the black figure. At this moment, only one head is missing from his bare trunk. Under the blow just now, the old man's head was blasted by the black figure, which shocked the people present. But when people looked at it, they found that the black figure was actually a puppet. Yes, this puppet is the North King. Do it, no one left. As Xiao Yan's voice fell, the North King behind him immediately seemed to have received an order. The dry roar came from the North King's mouth. Immediately, the soles of his feet suddenly stepped on the void. When the strength of his feet broke out, the North King's body twinkled in an instant. Almost at the same time, the North King appeared in front of a 7.5-star emperor. Without hesitation, before the latter reacted, the huge fist had been blasted out and hit his head. The hegemonic power almost made the North King kill with one punch. Under the hegemonic power of the North King, a 7.5-star emperor could not even make any response. In a twinkling of an eye, he has become the soul of the North King. Bang bang! In the twinkling of an eye, half of the 10.5-strong emperors who originally came to Xiao Yangchong have been quickly killed by the Northern King in the most overbearing way. At present, there are only 3 remaining strong semi-emperors in the sky, and the strength of these 3 strong semi-emperors is no more than 8.5-star emperors. At the moment, the 3 people stood in the void full of fear because of the terrible combat power displayed by the North King. An unparalleled sense of terror and horror rushed into their hearts. Cold sweat kept rolling down from their foreheads. All 3 bodies were shaking violently. What is this? How could he have such terrible power? The 3 stood back to back with frightened eyes on the sky, because the North King was so fast that they couldn't see the specific appearance of the North King. Therefore, the 3 people felt more terrible about the North King at the moment. Hiss! With the sound of a breaking wind, the figure of the North King suddenly appeared in front of a 6.5-star emperor among the 3 when their faces changed. The sudden appearance of the North King made the 6.5-star emperor's face turn white in an instant. However, just when the 6.5-star emperor was about to act, the North King shot at a faster speed, slammed out with a fierce punch and directly met the latter's forehead. In such a short distance, the 6.5-star emperor had no time to respond. Therefore, the next moment, the North King's fist came to the forehead of the 6.5-star emperor, and the fierce wind beat on the 6.5-star emperor's face. At this time, the latter's mind was blank, and even forgot how to fight back. Bang! Then, the violent sound came out, but the body shape of the North King flew backward uncontrollably for a distance, suddenly looked up, and his indifferent eyes were locked on the 8.5-star emperor who was fixed in front of him. At the critical moment just now, it was he who took the shot, so he shocked the North King back. At the moment, it was the 6.5-star emperor, who was already safe and sound. However, RAO is so. At the moment, the 3 people also dare not have the slightest carelessness. After all, even if they beat back the North King at the moment, it was just luck. Once the black figure in front of them really started, even if they were together, they might not be able to stop him. Without waiting for the 3 people to think more, the soles of the North King's feet, who had just stopped his body shape, stamped in the void again. Then, his body shape turned into a black light and flashed across the void in an instant. When the 3 people raised their eyes, the North King had appeared in front of the 8.5-star emperor strongman. His face was cold, his 2 palms tightly clenched into fists, his body moved, his strong body twisted in the void, and his whole body concentrated on one point. With one punch, he blasted down the 8.5-star emperor in front of him. Bang! Once again, the one who was expelled was still the North King. Under the joint action of another 7.5-star emperor and the 8.5-star emperor, he tried his best to repel the North King, and the 6.5-star emperor didn't fully wake up until now. Roar! With a low roar, Bei Wang's body flickered again. In a twinkling of an eye, he had attacked again, but the final result was still resisted by the 3 people. Roar! The dumb roar came out again. When the North King wanted to do it again, Xiao Yan, who had just stood up from the void, said faintly, Beiwang comes back. Hearing Xiao Yang's order, the Northern King just wanted to move his body, which suddenly stopped in the air. With a twist of his body, he flew over to Xiao Yang and guarded Xiao Yang's side. The rest, let me meet myself for a while. The indifferent laughter in the mouth just fell, and immediately after that, between heaven and earth, there was a sudden yin wind. Then, the three semi-emperor strong men saw with horror that Xiao Yang, who had just stood up, suddenly disappeared at the moment of the yin wind. Ah! The appearance of this scene made the faces of the three semi-imperial strong men suddenly change. At the same time, when they were shocked, the fighting spirit in their bodies poured out crazily, but they didn't wait for them to act. A ghost-like figure suddenly appeared in front of the three semi-imperial strong men in a very unbelievable way. When the figure appeared, the hearts of the three people were immediately frightened. They quickly raised their hands and wanted to seal in their hands. At the same time, the fighting spirit released began to surge with the actions of the three hands at this moment, converging between the palms of the three people. However, Xiao Yang didn't give them any chance to seal at all. He gave a cold hum in his nose. At the same time, his hands stretched out fiercely, and grabbed the palms of the two 7-star-and-a-half emperors and 6-star-and-a-half emperors on both sides. They were surprised. The cold sweat on his forehead immediately flowed out. The seal knot in his hands was interrupted, and the fighting spirit just surged on his body surface. It also returned to calm again. At this time, they lost all the means to resist. As for the 8-star-and-a-half emperor standing between the two, it was because Xiao Yang suddenly appeared at the moment. At the moment when terror floated to his heart, the condensed fingerprints in his hands were involuntarily interrupted. With a sneer, Xiao Yang controlled their palms and suddenly shook them. At the same time, the two figures were blown out by Xiao Yang in an instant. Yellow spring palm, ancient imperial seal. At the same time, Xiao Yang's body rushed forward and his mind moved. The body of King Kong Glaze was displayed again. Before the 8-star-and-a-half emperor came back to his senses, the huge body of King Kong had hit the 8-star-and-a-half emperor. Bang! In the twinkling of an eye, Xiao Yang has successively performed 3 kinds of heaven-level fighting skills. In this case, there is no time to take precautions. The 3 semi-emperor strong men are almost attacked at the same time. However, in a twinkling of an eye, the 3 high-level semi-emperor strong men who still have breath left at the previous moment have become the souls of Xiao Yang's men at this moment. Dissipated all the breath of life. At the moment, the 2 figures have turned into dead bodies. They fell uncontrollably from high altitude. With a bang, they fell hard into Hanshi City, leaving 2 huge pits. At the same time, between heaven and earth, everyone's eyes also involuntarily looked at Xiao Yang again. In everyone's eyes, there was only horror except horror. This video will end here.